If you've ever stayed at an Airbnb and felt like something was off, you're not alone. But let me warn you, what you're about to hear isn't just unsettling. It's the kind of story that changes the way you see the world. This is what happened when my girlfriend Anna and I stumbled upon a door that should have stayed locked. If you think you can handle it, stay with me, but don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Lucas and I'm 28. I work as a freelance graphic designer. And until recently, I thought I had a pretty ordinary life. That all changed when Anna, my girlfriend, and I booked what we thought would be a peaceful weekend getaway. It was supposed to be simple, a cozy little house, far from the chaos of the city where we could relax and reconnect. But what we found in that house, it still haunts me. We arrived at the Airbnb on a Friday afternoon. The house was old but charming, with ivy crawling up its stone walls and a view of dense woods stretching as far as the eye could see. It felt like a step back in time. The host had left us a handwritten note welcoming us, along with a warning. Stay out of the basement. It's locked for your safety. Anna laughed it off, calling it dramatic, but I couldn't shake the odd feeling that came with those words. I brushed it aside, determined to enjoy the weekend. That first evening was perfect. We cooked, talked, and sat by the fireplace. But as night fell, the house began to change. Around 2 a.m., Anna woke me up, her voice shaking. "Lucas, do you hear that?" she whispered. I strained to listen. Faintly, I could hear it. A soft, rhythmic knocking like something tapping on wood. It was coming from below us. "It's probably just the old pipes or something," I muttered, trying to calm her. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, curiosity got the better of us. That warning note from the host replayed in my mind, but Anna was determined. "Come on, Lucas," she urged. "It's probably nothing." We found the basement door in the kitchen, hidden behind a heavy wooden shelf. It was locked, just as the host had said. But Anna noticed something strange, a small key taped to the underside of the shelf. "What kind of safety lock comes with a conveniently placed key?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Against my better judgment, I let her unlock the door. The air that rushed out was damp and cold, carrying a faint metallic smell. The stairs creaked under our weight as we descended. At first, it was just an ordinary basement. Old furniture, dusty shelves, and a workbench cluttered with tools. But then we saw it. A second door, tucked into the far wall, partially obscured by an old mattress. This door was different. It was made of thick, dark wood, with carvings etched into its surface. Symbols I didn't recognize. There was no handle, only a circular indentation in the center. "Lucas, what is this?" Anna asked, her voice barely audible. Before I could answer, the indentation began to glow faintly as if responding to our presence. My instincts screamed to leave, but Anna, driven by some mix of curiosity and defiance, pressed her hand against it. The door groaned and slowly swung open. The space beyond was nothing like the basement. It was a tunnel leading into the earth. The walls were rough stone, lined with more of those strange carvings. The air was colder now, biting at our skin, and the faint smell of decay grew stronger as we moved forward. "Anna, we should turn back," I said, but she kept walking, her phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. That's when we saw it, a circular chamber, its walls covered in melted wax and charred remnants of candles. At the center lay a pile of bones, human bones. Anna let out a strangled gasp. "Lucas, what is this place?" Her voice echoed, but it felt like the sound was swallowed by the darkness. My chest tightened as a low, guttural whisper filled the air, coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. We turned to leave, but the door we had entered through was gone. In its place was solid stone. "No, no, no!" Anna screamed, pounding on the wall. I tried to calm her, but my own panic was rising. The whispers grew louder, turning into a cacophony of voices, each one more distorted than the last. Then, the chamber changed. The symbols on the walls began to shift, glowing faintly. The pile of bones moved, as if something beneath them was trying to rise. "We have to get out of here," I shouted, grabbing Anna's hand. We ran down the tunnel, but no matter which direction we took, we ended up back in the chamber. It was like the space itself was alive, playing with us. Hours turned into what felt like days. Our phones had died and we were running out of strength. The whispers gave way to footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing through the darkness. But we never saw anyone, only shadows that danced just beyond the reach of our light. Anna collapsed, sobbing. I held her, trying to stay strong, but the truth was I was terrified. I looked into her tear-streaked face and tried to lighten the mood, even as the whispers surrounded us. "Hey, when we get out of here, we're making a documentary about this," I said, forcing a shaky laugh. "Don't forget to like and subscribe, right?" She managed a weak smile, but it faded as the footsteps stopped. Silence fell, heavier than before. Then, something moved in the darkness. A figure, tall and cloaked, its face hidden. It raised a hand, and the symbols on the walls burned brighter. I don't remember what happened next. Just pain, cold, and then nothing. They never found us. The Airbnb is still listed, though the reviews mention strange noises at night. I can only hope no one else opens that door. But if you ever stay there and hear whispers in the dark, don't go looking. Some doors should never be opened. And if you're still here, tell me, would you have opened that door? Let me know, because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one curious enough to make that mistake. If I told you the forest could trap you, twist reality, and leave you questioning your sanity, would you believe me? What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. Stay with me, because by the end you might not look at the woods the same way again. My name is Lucas. I'm 28 years old, a software engineer, and for the most part my life is pretty normal. Steady job, decent apartment, and a solid relationship with my girlfriend Julia. Or at least that's what I thought before this happened. This isn't just a creepy tale to spook you, it's real. And I need you to listen carefully, because we barely made it out. Julia and I needed a break, a chance to disconnect from work and the noise of city life. When she found a secluded cabin online, it seemed perfect. Nestled deep in the woods, no neighbors, no distractions, just us. It sounded like the kind of escape we both desperately needed. The drive up was uneventful, peaceful even. As we got closer, the GPS signaled that we were approaching the cabin, but then it glitched, just one of those buffering moments you don't think much of. We found the place anyway, but there was something off. The cabin stood alone, its wooden exterior blending with the dense forest. It looked cozy, but the air around it felt heavy. As we unpacked, I noticed Julia was unusually quiet. She brushed it off, saying she was just tired from the drive. I let it slide, eager to enjoy the weekend. That night, the stillness of the forest was unsettling. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It felt watchful, like something was listening. Julia tried to make light of it, teasing me for being paranoid. The next morning, Julia told me she had seen something outside the window the night before. A figure standing at the tree line, barely visible in the moonlight. It was probably nothing. She laughed nervously, but her unease was clear. We spent the day exploring the woods, hoping some fresh air would help us relax. But the forest felt wrong. Every path we took seemed to lead nowhere. The trees felt closer together than they should have been, and there was no sign of trails or wildlife. As the sun began to set, the sense of isolation grew heavier. Julia and I were quieter than usual, the unease settling between us like an uninvited guest. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure, motionless, at the edge of the trees. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was too still, too dark, like the shadows themselves had taken form. When I turned to point it out to Julia, it was gone. That night, Julia and I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind outside felt amplified. We both pretended to be fine, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The following morning, we decided we'd had enough. We packed up early, eager to leave, but the road we came in on, it wasn't there anymore. Not blocked, not overgrown. Just gone. We drove in circles trying to find another way out, but every path led us back to the cabin. The GPS was useless, and our phones had no signal. The forest seemed to have swallowed us whole. Julia panicked, and I was barely holding it together myself. But we decided to wait until the next morning, hoping daylight would reveal a way out. As night fell, the air grew colder, heavier. The oppressive silence returned. Then we saw them again. The figures. This time there were more. Standing closer to the cabin, their outlines blurred and shifting. They didn't move, but their presence was suffocating. Julia clung to my arm, her voice shaking as she asked, "What do they want?" I didn't have an answer. We locked every door, every window, and huddled together in the living room. The flashlight in my hand felt like a joke against whatever was out there. Around midnight, the figures began to move, circling the cabin slowly, deliberately. The banging started soon after. It wasn't frantic. It was calculated, rhythmic, like they were testing us. Julia was crying now, and I could barely breathe. We pushed furniture against the doors, praying it would hold. The night dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. When the sun finally rose, the figures were gone. Determined to escape, we decided to leave on foot. With a backpack of supplies, we ventured into the woods, marking trees to avoid getting lost. But no matter how far we walked, we couldn't escape the cabin. It was always there, waiting for us. The shadows returned that evening, but this time, they weren't content to stay outside. They were inside the cabin, their forms flickering in and out of the corners of the room. Julia screamed as one of them brushed past her, cold and weightless. And then, everything went black. When we woke up, we were deep in the woods, miles from the cabin. Search parties found us days later, dehydrated and delirious. No one believed our story. The cabin, they said, didn't exist. But Julia and I know the truth. The forest, the shadows, they're real. And if you're ever tempted to book a remote cabin for a getaway, remember this story. If you've made it this far, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and share this video. Maybe someone out there knows what's really hiding in the woods. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to come face to face with death? Trust me, it's not like the movies. It's cold, chaotic, and leaves a scar you'll never forget. Let me tell you a story that will make you double-check every lock tonight. Hi, I'm Christian, 28 years old, a graphic designer. This isn't some internet creepypasta. This is real. It happened 2 years ago, and to this day, I still get chills thinking about it. If you're listening, stick around because this story isn't just about fear, it's about survival. It all started on New Year's Eve. My two best friends, Lucas and Bruno, and I decided to book an Airbnb cabin deep in the woods. We were tired of the city noise and wanted to welcome the new year with some peace and quiet. The photos online showed a cozy little place surrounded by trees with no neighbors in sight. It sounded perfect. When we arrived, the silence was deafening. No birds, no wind rustling through the trees, just stillness. I joked about it being a scene straight out of a horror movie, and we all laughed it off. The cabin itself was charming, with a warm fireplace and a rustic feel. Lucas volunteered to drive to the nearest town, about 30 minutes away, to grab supplies, leaving Bruno and me to settle in. It was about an hour later when we heard it. The knock. Not a gentle tap, but a loud, deliberate bang. Bruno froze mid-sentence, and I felt my stomach drop. Who could it be? We hadn't seen another soul since we arrived. I hesitated before opening the door, and when I did, I immediately regretted it. There he was, a man, tall and disheveled, with wild eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. His clothes were dirty, and he smelled like he hadn't bathed in weeks. "Keep it down," he barked, his voice gravelly and aggressive. "You're disturbing the peace." I stammered out an apology, confused. "We're not making any noise," I said, trying to stay calm. But he wasn't listening. His face twisted in anger as he stepped closer. "You city kids think you can do whatever you want, huh? He spat, his voice rising. Bruno joined me at the door, his presence giving me a bit of courage. "We just got here," Bruno said firmly. "We haven't done anything." The man glared at us for what felt like an eternity before turning and disappearing into the woods. I closed the door, locking it immediately. Bruno and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Who the hell was that?" he whispered. "I don't know," I replied, "but something's off." Lucas returned shortly after, his car loaded with snacks and drinks. We told him about the man, and he laughed it off, calling him some local nut job. But as the night went on, that feeling of unease grew stronger. Around 11:30 p.m., we decided to start a small bonfire outside. The air was crisp, and the stars were brighter than I had ever seen. For a moment, it felt like maybe we'd overreacted. That moment didn't last. From the darkness came a sound, branches snapping, heavy footsteps. We froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Then, out of the shadows, the man appeared again, holding a bat. "I told you to stay quiet," he shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. His eyes were wide with fury, and before we could respond, he swung the bat at Lucas's car, shattering a window. "Hey, stop!" Bruno yelled, stepping forward, but the man turned on him, raising the bat as if to strike. Then he pulled out a gun. The first shot rang out and we bolted for the cabin. Inside, we locked the door and ducked behind furniture as bullets shattered the windows. The sound was deafening, the cold night air rushing in through the broken glass. My heart pounded as I whispered, "We're trapped. What do we do?" Bruno was hyperventilating, and Lucas was frantically searching for his phone to call the cops. But there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. We were in the middle of nowhere. The gunshots stopped, and for a moment there was silence. I peeked out from behind the couch and saw the man pacing outside, muttering to himself. He was unhinged, completely unpredictable. "We need a plan," Lucas whispered. "We can't just sit here." I made a reckless decision. "I'll talk to him," I said. "Maybe I can calm him down." "No, Christian, don't," Bruno hissed, but I was already moving. I stepped outside, hands raised, my heart hammering in my chest. "Hey, listen," I started, my voice shaking. "We don't want any trouble." The man turned, his gun pointed directly at me. His face was a mask of rage, but behind it, I saw something else. Fear. Desperation. "You think you can just come here and take over?" he yelled. "This is my land." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "We didn't know. We're leaving in the morning. Please, let's just..." He fired a shot into the air, cutting me off. "Get back inside," he growled. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the door, slamming it shut behind me. The man's ranting grew louder, and we knew we had to act fast. Bruno found an old hunting rifle in the cabin, a decoration, but it still worked. Lucas barricaded the door while I checked the windows for any sign of the man. Suddenly, the sound of glass breaking from the back made us spin around. He was trying to get in. "Now or never," I whispered. Bruno aimed the rifle, and when the man appeared in the broken window, he fired a warning shot. The man stumbled back, startled, and for the first time he seemed unsure. Taking advantage of his hesitation, we grabbed our keys and bolted for the car. The shattered window made it freezing inside, but we didn't care. Lucas floored it, and we sped down the dirt road, not looking back. When we finally reached the nearest town, we called the cops. They investigated the cabin but found no trace of the man. No footprints, no belongings, nothing. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. To this day, I still wonder who he was. Was he a deranged local, a ghost, or something worse? All I know is that we were lucky to make it out alive. If you're still here, thank you for listening, and hey, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Stories like this remind us how fragile life can be. Stay safe, and don't take peace for granted. What I'm about to share with you isn't just a story, it's a warning. If you've ever thought of booking an old, charming Airbnb for a quiet escape, think again. Not everything in those picturesque listings is what it seems, and sometimes what's waiting for you is far darker than you can imagine. My name is Jake. I'm 28, a freelance graphic designer and someone who never believed in ghosts or supernatural nonsense. But last summer, something happened that shattered my skepticism. I still don't know if it was a nightmare, a hallucination, or something worse. What I do know is that I walked into that Airbnb as one person and left as someone or something completely different. It started like any other trip. I needed a break after weeks of working on a demanding project. Late nights, caffeine binges, and staring at screens had taken their toll. So I did what anyone would do. I searched for a weekend getaway. The house I found was perfect, or at least it seemed that way. It was a rustic Victorian in a quiet town, surrounded by trees and far away from the chaos of city life. The photos online made it look peaceful, almost idyllic. The reviews were glowing, praising the cozy atmosphere and the unique charm of the property. I booked it without a second thought. It wasn't until later that I realized none of the reviews had names attached to them. When I arrived, the house was bigger than I expected. The architecture was stunning, almost too perfect, like it belonged in another time. But as I stepped inside, something felt off. The air was heavier, the silence too complete, as if the house itself was waiting for me. The living room had antique furniture, faded wallpaper, and a faint scent of lavender mixed with dust. The kitchen was neat, but eerily empty. No signs of the homey touches I'd expected. As I explored, I noticed a hallway that wasn't in the photos. It was narrow, dimly lit, and seemed to stretch farther than the house itself. At the end of the hallway was a door. It was slightly ajar, the kind of thing you'd dismiss as a draft, but it wasn't windy outside. Something about that door pulled at me, a mix of curiosity and dread. Against my better judgment, I walked toward it. The room behind the door was small and cold, like it hadn't been touched in years. A single bed sat against the wall, its sheets yellowed with age. A dusty dresser stood across from it, cluttered with old knickknacks. The air smelled stale, and the light bulb flickered when I switched it on, casting distorted shadows on the walls. On the dresser, I noticed photographs, dozens of them. Each one showed a different person, their expressions frozen in terror or confusion. None of them looked like they belonged together, but what they had in common was the fear in their eyes. One photo caught my attention. A man in his 30s, standing in front of the very house I was in. Scrawled on the back of the photo was a date from 10 years ago, and underneath, the words, "He didn't listen." I should have left right then, but my curiosity got the better of me. Beneath the dresser, I found a box covered in dust. When I opened it, my stomach churned. Inside were personal items, watches, rings, wallets, and even passports. Each item had a name attached to it. The one on top belonged to a woman named Margaret. I grabbed my phone to search her name. Nothing. No social media, no news, no missing person reports. It was like she'd never existed. As I dug deeper into the box, I realized these weren't just lost belongings. They were trophies. Souvenirs of people who had stayed here and never left. The whispers started that night. At first, I thought it was the wind or creaking pipes, but they grew louder, distinct. They weren't coming from outside, but from within the walls, as if the house itself was alive and watching me. I tried to sleep, but the whispers became voices. Clear, chilling voices that called my name. "Jake, why did you come here?" By the second night, I was unraveling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces from the photographs. They weren't just images anymore. They were alive, moving, screaming silently at me. I decided I couldn't stay another night. I packed my things and headed for the door, but it wouldn't open. The lock was stuck and no amount of force would budge it. Desperate, I called the Airbnb host, but the line was dead. My phone's battery, full just an hour ago, drained inexplicably. The walls began to close in, and I swore I saw shadows moving just beyond the edges of my vision. The last straw came when I found a message carved into the wall above the bed. "You're next." That's when I knew I wasn't alone. The house had taken others before me, and now it wanted me. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and started talking. If you're seeing this, don't come here. Don't book this house, burn it, destroy it, do whatever you can. But don't let anyone else end up like me. The final hours are a blur. The house twisted around me, doors and windows disappearing as if the walls were swallowing them whole. The floor gave way, and I fell into darkness, surrounded by the echoes of those who came before me. I woke up in my car, parked miles away from the house. My belongings were gone, my phone dead, and my memory hazy. I tried to find the listing again, but it had vanished, like it never existed. I still don't know what happened in that house or how I escaped, but sometimes late at night I hear those whispers again, faint but unmistakable. The house isn't done with me. So if you're ever looking for a weekend getaway and come across an old Victorian that seems too good to be true, run. Because the house might still be looking for its next guest.